My name is Donnie Hall, and this is my video presentation for PS 205 Comparative Government class. All right, the country I chose to focus on is Sri Lanka, and I'll just give a little bit of a background about the country. It's also known as the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, and it sits on an island that covers approximately 65,000 kilometers. It's in the Indian Ocean. It's located off the southeastern coast of India, and it's home to about 21 million people from different ethnic and religious backgrounds. The island has been struggling lately with its multicultural reality, which it's been going on for about 2 decades now, and this struggle culminated in a bitter civil war between two of the ruling parties. It was the Sinhalese and the Tamil separatists, and it just only recently ended in 2009. But there's still ongoing attacks every once in a while taking place because it's been rocked by political and military struggles, and the island's economy has been sluggish and lacking in foreign investment. 14% of the population lives in urban areas, so it's mostly rural. And the largest city in Sri Lanka is the capital of Colombo, which consists of 680,000 people. The majority of the population of Sri Lanka is Buddhist, but there are significant minority populations of both Hindus, Christians, and Muslims. So that's kind of where the conflict originates from. Next, I'll kind of just talk about the type of government that Sri Lanka currently has. First, it's a democratic socialist republic, which is a type of government that advocates for political democracy, but at the same time keeps the economy and the means of production socially owned instead of having the government owning these means of production. This type of governance was created in Sri Lanka in the early 20th century, following the nationalist political movement that gave Sri Lanka its independence in 1948. It's a unitary state, meaning that it's a state that is governed by a single power that gives the central government supreme authority over the entire state. It's semi-presidential, which a president is both the head of the state and the head of government, and he exists alongside a prime minister and a cabinet, with the latter being responsible to the legislature of the state. In Sri Lanka's case, this is also known as the parliament. The prime minister is chosen by the elected president. And lastly, it's a constitutional republic, which also just known as a republic. This just means that it is a form of government where the rulers are elected by the people and the rules and laws are set forth in a written constitution. The first module that I'm going to focus on is from Module 4, dealing with Sri Lanka's constitution. And I'm going to give a brief history of how Sri Lanka came to independence and also its previous iterations of its constitution. It achieved its independence in 1948 through a peaceful political movement that sought to gain independence and self-rule for the country away from the British Empire. This political movement brought independence and gave Sri Lanka dominion status within the British Commonwealth, which would last for 24 years until finally in May 22nd, 1972, Sri Lanka would become the republic that is known today. The first constitution was the Danamora Constitution, and this was created before its independence. It was created in 1931 and lasted until 1947. This was when Sri Lanka was still known as Ceylon, which this constitution was significant in that it was the only constitution in the British Empire that wasn't from a westernized dominion such as Australia, Canada, and South Africa that actually enabled the country to have general elections with universal adult suffrage, meaning that all adults could vote with no exceptions. Next was the Solberry Constitution, and it lasted from 1947 until 1971. And this was significant in that it gave Sri Lanka a parliamentary form of government, as well as allowing for a judicial service commission and a public service commission for the first time. The Constitution also safeguarded the rights of minorities. And the third, before the Constitution we know today, is the Republican Constitution, and it replaced the Solberry Constitution in 1972 when Sri Lanka officially became a republic. This constitution provided a unicameral legislature, also known as the National State Assembly, with members that serve 6-year terms. This constitution also gave the sovereignty of the nation entirely to the legislature. Now I'll talk a little bit about their current constitution. It was originally promulgated on September 7th, 1978 by the National Assembly. It's the current constitution of Sri Lanka even today, and it's the third constitution since the country got its independence in 1948, and it's the second Republican constitution. The Constitution has 24 sections or chapters, and it deals with everything from the people, the state religion, their fundamental rights, the state language, citizenship, and as well as the jobs and duties of all three branches of government, including the executive, the legislature, and the judicial branch, and other things such as the way their finances work, and as well as how elections work, and everything to do with any government function is in these chapters. The Constitution of Sri Lanka revolves around a president who is invested with broad executive powers, both the head of the state and head of the armed services. It's got 772 articles, and it recognizes Buddhism as the state religion and guarantees a broad range of fundamental rights. This constitution also establishes the duty of the state and the citizen. It is the task of the state to establish a democratic socialist state, to ensure distribution of wealth, oversee economic development, and raise educational and cultural standards. It must also commit itself to the decentralization of the government, as well as promotion of national identity through eliminating any discrimination. In return, it is the duty of the citizen to foster a national unity by relinquishing their personal rights to ensure that racial or religious harmony and public health is protected. And there's currently been 19 amendments to the Constitution with one proposed. So 20 if you count the proposed amendment. And I'll talk a little bit about Sri Lanka's recent 2018 constitutional crisis. It was caused when President Sarasena actually appointed a second prime minister when there was still one in place, which he's not allowed to do within his scope of authority. The outcome of this crisis was that the original prime minister actually ended up staying in his spot, and the one that he tried to appoint, his plan failed basically. And one of the repercussions from this is it's believed that the 2019 Sri Lankan Easter Day bombings are resulted from this happening, because due to the breakdown in the government. And next, I'll focus on Module 6, which deals with the legislature, and I will talk about Sri Lanka's legislature. The legislative structure of Sri Lanka is that it's a parliamentary legislature from a semi-presidential system of government, which means that it's both a mixture of a presidential and parliamentary system of government. And the legislature of Sri Lanka is unicameral. It's got a parliament of 225 members that are each elected to 6-year terms by a direct vote. The members of parliament are then able to elect a speaker, a deputy speaker, and a chair of committees. The president is able to dissolve parliament at any time, which significantly weakens their authority by the executive branch, which maintains power equally between the two. The main purpose of the parliament is to pass bills and resolutions. This legislation becomes law upon a majority vote and the endorsement of the speaker. If the cabinet requires it, however, the bill may require a referendum, which the president must endorse. No court can question any law adopted in this way. And last, I'll talk about the legislation. Most provisions of the Constitution, if they want to amend it, can only be done by a 2/3 majority in the parliament. However, the amendment of some certain basic features, such as there's clauses on language, religion, and reference to Sri Lanka as a unitary state that not only requires a 2/3 majority, but also approval at a nationwide referendum. And how a bill becomes a law, it's first drafted by the Legal Draftsman's Department of the government. Once it's drafted, the Cabinet of Ministers decides what laws will be made, and any minister which wants a law will prepare a cabinet memorandum setting out details for. And once it's approved, the ministry will take initiative to have it enacted. After it's drafted, it's then printed in the Gazette, which is Sri Lanka's government newspaper, which is the first time the public is able to see it. Then it gets placed on the order of Parliament for debate. And once it's debated and passed by the parliament, it'll be certified by the speaker, and that's when it finally becomes an act of parliament, and a number is assigned to it as well as the year that it was enacted.